Hello, everyone. This is Anna McNaught at Houston in Action.
Hi, this is Oscar, organizer at Houston in Action.
We are so happy to host everyone today. It's very special for us to have the commitment of all of you to share 4 hours of your time with us. And we are really looking forward to sharing all of the information that we'll have available for you today. A couple of housekeeping items is we're going to ask you to mute your microphones, and you should be able to unmute them as well. So as we have some breakout activities, we'll guide you through those, but for now you can mute your microphones, and we're gonna get started with the agenda review. So today what we have is we're going to cover, we're going to do our welcome and grounding. Then we'll cover story of self and what that means for the capacity of your organization. We're going to do an exercise around the story of self. And we'll have a break in between for 15 minutes. Then we'll go into the census outreach part 2, which will include tabling, canvassing, and then talking briefly about resources. And then we'll have another break. Then we'll go into our data system. So for those of you that have been granted funds and or will be granted funds, congratulations. This is going to be a particularly important part of this section, as we will show you how to use our data system to input your information and then being able to look at your impact. All right, thank you everyone for joining. We're gonna get started, and we're actually going to talk about our work for today. This is a reminder for those that participated in the last training that our work is about people. For those of you that are new to the space, what we do is relationships are forever. That's what we're doing. We're building relationships with our communities, and to ground us in the fact that we're going to work after the census is done, that our commitment to communities is for the long term. So thank you everyone for being here.
Yes, and as a community organizer, a lot of the work that we want to ground ourselves in everything that we do is revolved around how we connect with the community. I noticed last time when we had a training, I received some emails and information from folks that they wanted a little bit more in-depth training about our story of self and how we're talking to the community. The story of self, like I mentioned last time, is something that was developed through public narrative, which is a training from Marshall Gans. This is a Harvard professor who's not only been used in political campaigns, but honestly, it's overall organizing work. And the reason behind that is because we want to make sure that that how we are talking to the community and how we're impacting them is something that resonates with the person, not only who's presenting, but with the organizational history. So what we're going to start off today is actually having a training around a story of self developed under the model of Houston in Action. And in this story of self model, we're going to talk about the ways that we connect both to the community and then ask them or persuade them or empower them to take action. So through this practice, we're going to do a few things. We're going to try something fairly new with our system, and we're going to have actual breakout groups where everyone will be able to either share a little bit about their story in those groups and then share within the space. If you make sure to check your emails, you would have gotten a worksheet practice that we're going to go over together, so you don't worry if you didn't get to read it, about how we're going to practice this. So y'all can think about different ways of implementing this practice during your outreach events or when you're talking to the community. So if you haven't opened it yet, please make sure to take a look at the Story of Self worksheet, and we're going to be covering that throughout the first portion of our training today. So I hope everyone's excited and open to share with people both maybe where you are, because I know ECHO has the whole team with them, and maybe even for folks that were able to break out into groups, you could be sharing with people through the phone or through your computer. So let's get started. So one thing I want to make sure that we go over is that the story of self, again, is a method of organizing. It's one of the ways that we use to both connect with the community, but also that we train other people of the community share their story in the spaces. What this looks like for even like service or nonprofit work could be also that someone that gain a lot of knowledge or support or help through your organization you can use this as a practice so they can share their story with the rest of the community. So that way the community can resonate with the person who's there volunteering, the person who received help, and through their story uh, they can feel that the place that they're in is something that is going to benefit them because it benefits other people in the community. And also for the person who shares it is a way for them to feel empowered as they're participating. So they're not just people who are coming to get service or get information, they're people who are actively working with you. So like I mentioned before, this is part of the public narrative theory of organizing through Marshall Ganz, and I've learned it through many different sources. There are many different organizing work. It started a long time ago through the United Farm Workers organizers, and it's used a lot, especially through immigration organizing, when we share our stories about how we want to humanize our cause and our issue. So it's a very proven, cool practice that I think that the more you share it, the better you can connect with people in your community. So a big question that we have is like, what moves people? So I know internally we might be able to think about why do people do anything? Some might say it's necessity, needs. Some people might think that what moves people is money. And there's a variety of reasons when we think about what moves our community. So if you think about your specific community, how you think what's going to move people from a place of being inactive to a place where they're moving with you. And where we land is that ultimately, if you don't have ways of persuading people with material, um, the way to move people is by sharing your stories, and then how it can impact not only the community, but by impacting the people that you're speaking with, you can build a community even if it's not there yet. So this is a hero's journey. This is a story cycle that I'm working on at the moment. It reflects around how we tell a story, and the method that I'm doing the story of self training is actually going to be implemented in a much larger track of not just story of self, us, and now, but going deeper into how we share these stories and how everything's a cycle. So this is something that's also based on this. A writer called Joseph Campbell who talks about how the monolith and how do you share a story when it comes to the individual. So these are the different cycles that some people might go through when they're telling a story. If you want to analyze this a little further and how when we finish doing our story of self and how you can develop even more, please feel free to jump back into this space or even check out the book. It's a really fascinating book. But what I want to go into more is how we develop how we're using our stories to move people. So when we think about folks that we serve, we're not just talking about people with limited resources or people who've been disenfranchised. I mean, we're talking about, honestly, folks who've been in systems of oppression, who maybe sometimes through unjust laws or through what they've seen in the government have like fear. We want to acknowledge, as we did last time during our training when we talked about the census and we went over the visual history of the census, what is the historical racism that has plagued a lot of our communities. And through this process, we have been able to, by recognizing the fear, we can, by recognizing the fear, we can ultimately talk about what it is that that is affecting the community, and also also sharing that we understand what the communities go through, because in many cases we are part of the same community we serve. We look like them, We live through the same realities, and it's why we do the work, and we love the work that we do when we're helping the community. But because a lot of this historical racism and fear, these oppressive laws and systems, there is a feeling of worthlessness. And I think we kind of talked about it last time during ensuring that when people come to see us, that they're not just getting some kind of service where people might feel dependent on getting service from us, but that they can feel empowered through the process. So through the stories, we can make people feel like change is possible. And the way we move them is by, again, by sharing your stories. Sometimes it's an individual stories, and other times it could be something as simple as the organizational stories, where you're sharing through how you develop through the organization or how the organization developed in itself. And at the end, what we really want to make sure is that people feel that hope. So whatever you share through your story, can it be hopeful? Is it hopeful? Will it be something that you feel that that things will get better? Because it's also there are many ways to share a story, but sometimes when you develop a story that doesn't make the community feel like they can improve, learn more, or change, then we end up in a place where people feel like that was a sad story, but where do I go from here? So we want to make sure that how we close the space or how we close the story is in a sense on how you feel hopeful. And I can start with myself. So as we think about the different narratives or the different steps in telling a story, I do see it more of a cycle. So like the shift or challenge. The reasoning, I've also changed the language for people who might have seen this in the past between challenge, choice, and outcome to shift is because sometimes it's not just a challenge, but it's something that's impacted you or your life or that impacted the community that was out of your control. So it's not, it's a shift that made a change. And the reason why I also avoid coming from the idea of it being a choice is that in many cases our communities do not have a choice. So whenever they are moving forward, it's not necessarily that they choose to fight for something, but that they have to. And then when we think about like what is the outcome, it's more like the impact that we are having in our community. And what I've added to this portion of this story is that we want to make sure that we're asking people to participate. If you remember a few weeks ago when we did the training, I think Monique was like, I'm waiting for you to ask me for something. And that happens a lot where we might share a story, but we forget to ask people to participate. So for me, for example, when I was about, uh, if you can please mute yourself, and we'll have definitely plenty of time for people to share portions of what they want like to share in a bit. But I appreciate the enthusiasm. If you, so for me, if you, when I was about 17, I actually had no idea that that anything like the Dream Act was available or that there was resources for the community. When I graduated from high school, one, okay. Yeah, if you haven't muted yourself, can you please do so so we can make sure that there isn't an echo? But thank you. So as we move forward, when I was about 17, I graduated from high school. I started my own landscaping business, and it went very well for me for a few years. But I honestly did not feel like I was I was doing the best I could to help my community. Um, I I felt that I could do more, and I felt that even though I was making maybe a good sum of money, I didn't feel good or that what I was doing was necessarily useful or the impact of my community. When I turned about 19, I was actually got really depressed because since I am undocumented, I couldn't open the business that I wanted to open. I had nowhere to essentially go. I didn't think the university was a space for me because I misunderstood what going to the university meant. I actually thought that they were going to ask for like legal documentation and that I wasn't going to find enough money to go to college. So I knew that wasn't an option. I knew doing the work I was doing wasn't an option either. So I felt really stuck. And I remember growing up, one time that when I was about 9 years old, my father, my mother, my older brother, and my younger sister, we got a phone call from one of our family of the friend who lives like about 20 blocks away, and she told us that there was an ice raid happening. And that night we spent it sleeping at a theater where my father cleaned. And we cleaned the theater and then we spent the whole night there. I remember sitting down the hallway at this empty theater, and my mother was sitting by the exit door, just staring at the door, and she was praying. And I didn't understand why she was so afraid. I didn't understand what was happening entirely. But what I do remember is that the next day we went back home and we got dressed and went to school. And then my mom the following day went back to work, and we just continued to push forward. And I think it was that in that relationship with them that I decided that they didn't give up once, and they continue to move forward despite everything they were going through. So I decided to move forward, and I decided to look for something that I felt that I could help my community. And that's where I actually got connected to a lot of organizations and student organizations who work with undocumented immigrants. And after volunteering for about 2 years, I became a community organizer with United We Dream, which is an organization that helps undocumented immigrants in Houston. And because we were able to connect with the community, we actually were able to develop a lot of new leaders through giving them DACA services. We were able to recruit new young people to participate who felt just as stuck as I did, but now we were like a vessel to help and to build them into the people that they are today, who are working in different nonprofits, going back to universities, going back to schools. And I feel very proud of the work that I've been able to do. So what I hope that we can learn from what I've shared today is um, that you can share your story, and that you could have gone through all the difficult things that you might have gone through, but there's a reason why you do the work that you do, and it's not only because you go because it's a job, but because it means something to help your community, and it means something to everybody in the space to be able to uplift the people who live around you, because at the end, that's what we care about. So what I want to ask everyone here is that, for the remainder of this session, that you participate, that you get a chance to read through the worksheets, and that you share your story as well. Because through sharing these stories, we can recruit and move people to take action. So I know most people are on mute, but I hope that if you're listening, that if you yes or a high five, and we can continue to move forward. So when you think about your story, think about the plot, and make sure that your message is hopeful. And I know that it's that we're not physically in the same room, so the story might come different through the phone, but I hope some of you felt a little hopeful through my story. So this is a story of self from this awesome organizer that I'm going to put on, and hopefully everyone can hear. She is an amazing, well, I think she can speak for herself. It's only going to take a couple of minutes.
Vaheguru Ji Ka Khalsa, Vaheguru Ji Ki Fateh. On Christmas Eve, 100, my grandfather waited in a dark and dank cell. He sailed by steamship across the Pacific Ocean from India to America, leaving behind colonial rule. But when he landed on American shores, immigration officials saw his dark skin, his tall turban worn as part of his Sikh faith, and saw him not as a brother, but as foreign, as suspect. White filed his purpose. 1913. My grandfather Kehar Singh became a farmer, free to practice the heart of his Sikh faith, love and oneness. And so when his Japanese American neighbors were rounded up and taken to their own detention camps in the deserts of America, he went out to see them when no one else would. He looked after their farms until they returned home. He refused to stand down. In the aftermath of September 11th, when hate violence exploded in these United States and a man that I called uncle was murdered, I tried to stand up. I became a lawyer like the man who freed my grandfather, and I joined a generation of activists fighting detentions and deportation, surveillance and special registration, hate crimes and racial profiling. And after 15 years, with every film, with every lawsuit, with every campaign, I thought we were making the nation safer for the next generation. And then my son was born. On Christmas Eve, I watched him ceremoniously put the milk and cookies by the fire for Santa Claus. And after he went to sleep, I then drank the milk and ate the cookies. I wanted him to wake up and see them gone in the morning. I wanted him to believe in a world that was magical. But I am leaving my son a world that is more dangerous than the one that I was given. Because we are raising a brown boy in America. A brown boy who may someday wear a turban as part of his faith. And in America today, as we enter an era of enormous rage, as white nationalists hail this moment as their great awakening,